like all the old residents in there, but the half that's been like rebuilt as well, like that's got all the new people in the private home. So it's a very like tense situation and time, and we're trying to document that in its rawest form, unfiltered. We ain't going to areas trying to make them look better or worse than they are, just trying to capture like a time frame really.
Yeah, and I've got some paintings over there that I've done recently. That one there, Carpenter's Estate, me and Alfie both went there and got pictures together. So I don't know if you've got the prints there. Got prints there?
Not a carpenter.
But he's got some anyway. And I've got some prints with Abbots that I did, signed, and I made some books as well. So yeah, have a look afterwards.
Yeah, so we're just obviously like really honoured to be here, and Brutalism has massively impacted our work. You know, we've been capturing the blocks as well as the life on the blocks, as much as they're all being knocked down now. So it's very fitting that we're in here as well, like in the estate, showing our work, giving back a little bit of our work, because if it weren't for the estates, like the actual reality of what it would be, then we probably wouldn't be up here.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you very much guys, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you both so much for speaking, and make sure you buy some of their work at the end and talk to them about it. It's really amazing. I actually grew up opposite Carpenter's Estate.
Oh, did you? Oh, wow.
It's really nice to see it like illustrated in your work. So the premise of tonight's evening is to explore how post-war brutalist architecture in London became the physical and the cultural infrastructure that has led to the birth of grime, and how grime has impacted us all, whether it's through clothes, talk, you name it. Like, we live and breathe grime every day, whether we realise it or not. So I wanted to introduce this lovely panel we have tonight, starting from right to left. But yeah, please go first, Richard, and I'm going to ask everyone some questions, and yeah, hope you have a lovely evening.
Okay, wonderful, and thank you all for being here. I'm Mr. Yeboah. I'm a author, historian, writer. I wrote a book recently called From Hackney with Love, an intimate history of gentrification. You can find it here, you can find it on Amazon. And a lot of my work is all about the impact of gentrification on local communities, including in Hackney, exploring themes like housing, race, culture, class, gender, and how it's transformed people's experience over the last 20 to 30 years. So do read the book, and Naz, ask me whatever questions you want around culture and grime and everything else, but yeah, that's what my work is mainly about.
And then for yourself as well?
I'm Reece West. I've been a rapper-songwriter for maybe about 10-15 years, growing up in London. Been releasing most of that time. The last like 3-4 years I've been doing a degree in music business, and currently coming to the end of a degree in masters in songwriting. So I've just been kind of like exploring myself and London, and being able to try and communicate that and give back the 20,000 hours that I've put in back into inspiring the next generation and helping people to kind of understand what you're saying about like grime not just being like a genre, but being like, when people ask me what grime is, I kind of say like I couldn't not be grime if I tried, because of the experiences I had growing up and being from London, and yeah, so.
Oh, yeah, you done already there. Yeah, I'm the grime journalist, rapper, MC. I've been part of grime or whatever before it even had a name. I started out in jungle, like with Wilding D-Double, like 98. So I've been on Rinse FM, that we all kind of moved on to garage. Garage obviously didn't like what we was doing, but obviously there was a separation. Grime, done stuff on Funky House. I mean, more recent times, similar to Reece, I went to university, got a music performance management degree, and then recently been writing dub plates for AG outside doing the street performances and whatnot. And yeah, I've got an album called Who Invented Grime coming out in September, so this was just so fitting, aligned with what I'm doing. So yeah, that's why we're here today.
Fabulous. And then for yourself?
Hi, I'm Hattie Collins. I am a writer and broadcaster. I'm from Birmingham originally. Have slightly lost my accent, sorry, but if there's any Brummies in here, it'll come out again. I have been a music journalist roughly for about, I'm going to show my age here, but like 26 years-ish, 24, 25 years. When I started out, I was writing just generally about music. It coincided with the birth of a music that we didn't know the name of at that time, but that, like you were just saying, had come from kind of garage and was transforming into what at the time it was called like 8-bar or igloo, sub-low, and eventually someone, to this day no one is quite sure who, named it grime. And because I was just writing at that time for magazines that RIP, most magazines I wrote for no longer exist, but magazines like Touch Magazine, Blues and Soul, Rewind, which were amazing magazines, print magazines that existed back then. I just ended up writing about this music, and I must shout out Chantal Fiddy, who was actually the person that really brought me into that, another journalist who brought me into that world. And yeah, so from a very early stage, before we really knew what it was, I was interviewing people like Dizzy and Wiley and Roll D on their estates in Limehouse. And in 2016, I put together a book with as much of the grime scene as I could, producers, MCs, managers, parents, which is an oral history on grime. It's called This Is Grime, and you can no longer really buy it because it sold out. We didn't print enough copies, sadly, but I think you can still get it on Amazon. So that is available, and it's basically an oral history of the genre of the music, of the culture, by the people that made it. So I kind of just did a lot of interviews and put it all into a book. So it's from the words of the scene itself. And yeah, that's me.
Hi, yeah, I'm Dave Lunt. I'm a music video director. I'm actually a product of gentrification myself because my family got priced out of London when I was young. So I grew up in South Wales, and then when I was 12, Channel U came out, and I sort of just fell in love from afar. And then when I started doing videos, it just became a thing of like trying to incorporate all these things that I was seen as an outsider. And you know, I used to get the train back into London to see my family, and giant skyscrapers and that. Where I grew up, there's like probably 3 buildings higher than 2 stories, and I was just like, what the fuck is this place? And yeah, my videos just try and sort of replicate the early street photography of the grime scene, people like Simon Wheatley and Ewan Spencer, and people like Risky Roads and stuff. I'm just trying to sort of mould all those things into one, and I've sort of been adopted by the new like mellow grime wave that's happening now, and I'll do a lot of videos for like Names Bliss and Paul Stefan and that kind of new wave. And I think yeah, Brutalism really like lends itself to the kind of videos that I try and do, because it's like a sort of, say like the old grime videos would always be in sort of in front of the blocks that are maybe a bit more rough around the edges, and then the sort of new sound I feel like complements places like this and the Barbican and stuff, where it's, you know, like a modern twinge on an old kind of thing. But yeah.
Oh, give it up for our panel, guys. I'm so excited to get stuck in because I feel like everyone has like different perspectives. You all come from different backgrounds, and even though like you come from different backgrounds, there's like a thread that connects us all, whether it's through like our music taste or the areas that we've grown up in, which I think is what makes this panel really special. I think the first question I kind of want to kick off with is thinking about architecture and grime, first of all, like for the whole panel. You know, when like grime was coming around, you had people like living in the same like blocks as each other, which meant that crews were forming, people were clashing, so on and so forth. Do you feel like that's what helped the high energy of grime, and do you feel like that contributed massively to like the birth of grime, people living within like close proximity to each other? And if so, what did that do? So yeah, like feel free to chime in, whoever wants to kick that off first.
I'd say yeah. I mean, personally, I lived on Teviot Estate, which is, for anyone that knows Blackwall Tunnel, when you come out of Blackwall Tunnel going towards Hackney. So if you're coming that way, it's the burgundy blocks with the beige roofs there. But I'd say that to say that Rinse FM was across the road. And then Balfron Tower was not too far from Teviot, which is the sister or brother brutalist block from Trellick Tower. Lived in there as well. And that was where they would put the Rinse FM rig.
Yeah.
And then you had Free Flats, which was probably like 10 minutes down the road. But I say all of that to say Target lived near Free Flats, kind of. Dizzy lived near there. I lived in Teviot. Tinchy lived down the road. J2K lived down the road. So when you're on the block, there's limited things you can do compared to being in an area that's probably more affluent or got more parks and that. And that kind of, you're going to check your mates, but you've all got the same ideas of things to do. And you know what it's like, you follow your mate somewhere down the road and then you've gone into a rabbit hole of excitement of, oh, what's this? We're in the kitchen. No, that's a radio station. We're just doing that. Or we're rapping outside and just you see someone doing something you like, and you're like, okay, so it's that kind of community of, it may appear that you're just dossing around doing nothing, but you don't know that you're on the start of something that becomes grime today. So I definitely think that community spirit on the tower block definitely helps.
I think as well, like culturally, a lot of, when I was a kid growing up, it was like playing out. It was before the whole, like having a phone. Like my little brother's 12 and he was like, by 3 he was on the iPad like doing backflips. You know? So I didn't really have it, like we had, our phones had like maybe a few songs to play beats on or something like that. But from there, you kind of build a sense of community playing amongst each other. And when you go to school, it was like cool to have at like lunch break, everyone had a few lyrics, like 16 bars or something like that. And it was just, it kind of just integrated us all together. And then going on from that into what you're saying about clashing and the influence of that, I feel like once you are trying to be like the best person in the room, almost, there's a sense of, it's like competitive, but it's not always from the outside. It looks like something that is like super aggressive or we hate each other or something like that. But as you said, like when you're around each other all the time, you never know what someone's going through on that day or how someone's feeling, or you don't even know how someone's taken, something like that. And it kind of builds a sense of like energy in the room where you're always on your toes. And that kind of gave a lot of great artists like the training earlier on to go on and become like great live show artists by being on radio, going back to back, having these clashes. And like as someone that's had like, I don't know, in modern grime, I don't know if anyone's had as many clashes as me. Like a lot.
That's a good point. It's like estates are almost like a training ground for you to improve your pen, and it's thinking about like the digital sphere and whether you can, you know, borrow from your friends in like that communal space in a block as much as you could back then, and like whether that's affected like people's ability in rapping now. It's important, yeah, as you said, it's important to kind of reflect on that.
100%. It gives you so much training in your breathing, the practice and memory of your lyrics, and being in competitive circumstances, like I was saying before, it's not always a negative thing. Like I feel like it's built positive relationships, and like some of the people that I've had like big online altercations with, we're cool now. So is it really that deep? Yeah,
it's true. It's kind of like, you know, when you're talking about breathwork and all of that, it's like, is grime also then a sport in that sense? You know, there's so many kinds of things that you have to think about, and it's like athletes kind of tick those kind of boxes as well. So, you know, are grime artists athletes? That's the next question. I'm just joking, guys.
But I also think, sorry, just quickly,
of course.
Children, because I work with children occasionally, they all need a creative outlet, and I think when you're bored and you've got nothing to do, like you said, with the no phones, you gravitate naturally to something creative, and if one person's doing something that's like a creative thing, then they all want to join in, and if anything, it's a good thing, you know, because they all get to
100%.
Express themselves.
I think there's just also, as we're here like in this space, that one of the things that lots of times when I speak to people, it came up a lot, say to Strider or Skepta was the local spaces, the community spaces like this one. Youth clubs were also really important for kids. And obviously, as we know, they are all being shut down at a rapid rate. But someone like Tinchy would meet Dizzy in like down Devon's Road, down on Devon's Road Youth Club. And then when they would get kicked out, his mom would be like, okay, you guys can come back to mine. So they would all go back to Tinchy's house. Same with like Wiley, like his dad opened up his house at one point when Rinse got kicked off, and he was like, okay, you can do Rinse in my front room. So there was also the kind of cross-pollination of adults allowing kids encouraging kids to come back home. And because they were obviously doing something that was really creative and really positive, letting them just make loads of noise. And but yeah, spaces like this I think are really, really important as well.
But I agree with everything that's been mentioned already. But one of the really important things that just to really emphasise is that when you think about when grime first emerged in like 2003, 2002, like particularly in areas like Hackney where I grew up, it was rough. Like it was a struggle, and having an outlet like grime to be able to MC on the blocks, not get into fights with other people, have a sense of community, have a sense of a clique, a crew with your boys was everything, and grime kind of gave us that outlet. But I think for like people in Hackney, we had already had Jungle, which had like been kind of on various different estates like Nightingale, like Bannister, which kind of felt like the precursor to grime. And you know, we had already seen MCs on blocks before grime had even emerged. So we almost had like grime as a saviour for our immediate issues with crime and violence and all that kind of stuff. But we had already seen kind of our older lot already doing the MCing through Jungle, and saw some olders from E3 doing it through grime. So it was like it was an opportunity to almost branch out to some success, but also give us a bit of solace around some of the issues that we were facing.
I feel like grime as well was like that. The whole concept of MCing was very inclusive, and it gave like something for everyone to like get on together with. In a time where, like, I don't know, you're not looking at who's got the nicest phone, or who's got these new Nike shoes, or who can go here and who can't go here. We've all got lyrics, and we're all like here and we're doing something together. And as you said, like when you're going through stuff and having an outlet to be able to talk in a way that is vulnerable without being, I don't know, like soft or whatever, how it was like back in the day, you know, like it's a bit different with how we talk about our feelings now to how it was back in the day.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Do you know, I'd say just building on that as well, so not to cry you lot a river, but there's never been an estate that I've lived on which ain't going to be knocked down, right? And so if you lot know anything about local councils, it's that if an estate is being knocked down, or there's regeneration plans, they just leave it. So for example, when I was probably about 13, 14, I lived in Gascoigne Estate, and it's you know, a lot of it's been knocked down now, but because of that, you'd have like leaks in the flats, and like my flat had loads of damp and mould in it. And to be honest, like people who weren't from there, like I wouldn't want to bring people to my house, like even just to come. Alright, obviously when you're 13, 14, you're not coming over and playing anymore, but like maybe have people over to your house. I wouldn't want to do it. So for me, any type of like creative outlet, what that means is that places that you would normally be not ashamed of, because everyone had pride to be from that area, because it's like you're all going through the same thing. You're already charged up because of that. Then it's like we've got something positive that we could bring someone to the estate, and there could be, I don't know, let's say someone's shooting a music video. Not only is something productive being done, not only is there good vibes, but it's something you can actually be proud of that's come from that area. Like I said, for me, I was like embarrassed even just to be living there, which is ridiculous, and it weren't even up to us, it's just the council's sort of mismanagement. But it gives people not only that outlet, but that pride. Like everyone can come together in a community, like it's already been said, come together in a community where you're all feeling the same thing, you're all been going through similar issues, and then you can produce something positive, and you can bring someone along, or you can show it online and say, this has come from this estate, which everyone's written off, including the council. This has come from here, And so it's that sense of pride, I think, is just so important, and brings a different type of energy that it just can't be replicated.
That's such a good point, because I think when you think of estates, or particularly when it comes to like lived experiences, I completely resonate with that, because like for a long time I always had this image like, make it out, you know, you're going to leave this place, you're never going to want to come back. And then as I got older and I started like moving around to other places, I was like, I've never felt anywhere at home other than the blocks that I've grown up in. And it's always made me think, well, you know, as an adult and you have that kind of insight, well, the people who grow up in these places and who live in these places still, well, they deserve for it to be better managed. They deserve to have, you know, community centres like this within it. Like, when I came here earlier, I was like, wow, I wish this existed in every block, you know, for people to gather, talk about ideas, creativity, and not just like have conversations about whether the building's being managed properly, but to talk about music. Like, this is such an incredible conversation. And yeah, it's something that I want for everyone, you know. But to swiftly move on to the next question, for both of the artists on the panel, Reece and the grime journalist, how did growing up in an estate shape your musical identity and lyrical content?
Oh, massively. Kind of to lead on from what we were just talking about, one thing that I liked about grime in general, you're on an estate, you're from where you're from. Mm-hmm. Until you get a perspective of someone looking at you saying, oh, your area ain't nothing or anything, this is all you've got. Mm-hmm. So this is like the place you end up championing. Yeah. And when we was looking at like hip hop, it was a case of the good rappers would rap from about where they're from. Yeah. And even if you didn't know where they were from, you was invested, like, oh, New York, they're talking like this. Even if you don't understand the slang, you end up learning about the slang. Yeah. And with grime, being on an estate, it's just like, if your kid's growing up and someone's got a football and goes, do you want to play? And you just start playing. Mm-hmm. People will be together and it'll be like, oh, you want to hang out? He's got a 16 bar. Oh, how do we do that? We just get to do this together. And then what ends up happening, your friends, your community, the estate becomes your almost your social media before it's there. Mm-hmm. So Reece might have a bar and he says, "Have a go. Wow, that's cool." And then everyone that can MC, that can't MC, we're giving them a barometer of where he's at. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And then it might be a case of, I don't know anyone that smokes weed or anything in here. Once you go down a road of, oh, I know a drug dealer here, you'll know loads of them. So you'll meet an MC, me and Reece might end up going on the bus down the road. Mm-hmm. His mate happens to be a DJ. We're in the house now, MCing, and this kind of thing starts letting you know what the level is. Okay, that's good. All right, you're better than maybe the 10 that's here. What's the next step? Pirate radio. So then you're measuring yourself against these kind of metrics of things and places that you hear. But definitely the whole estate vibe and energy, like everyone's kind of said on the panel, this thing that's going on, this community, this same feeling of whether you're an artist or whether you're just a resident, there's some sort of kind of underdog story that kind of just is internally there. And I think it comes from where you're from.
Yeah, of course. And then for yourself, Reece, as well?
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what the grime journalist has been saying. I feel like when you grow up in an estate or you come from a certain area, you kind of feel like you only have a few options, like being famous or rapping or being an athlete or, I don't know, if you've got like a good father figure in your life. You looked, I don't know, I used to look at like being a businessman or something because they always had like money and they had a good family, and do you know what I mean? You kind of like idolize like these sort of things, because I feel like obviously of recent it's become like cool, like estates has been like cool, like with Top Boy and the re-emergence of like fashion and swag and like this type of stuff that's come back in. It's cool to be linked to an estate or to live on somewhere that's got good architecture like that or something. But I don't think like when I was growing up it was really like that. I feel like people were kind of like embarrassed if you come from like a poorer area, or as you said before about like bringing people over to your house and stuff like that. So having like being able to like do grime and rap and do something creative, it kind of like gave people that come from a similar background as you something in common without looking at what you don't have.
Yeah.
like, you know, expressing what we do have.
Exactly. It makes you really aspirational. I think, you know, like experiencing grime music within like an estate, you're all with your friends and you're like, cool, like we've got this major plan, we're all gonna blow, and it's really cool because I think for myself, like I'm not a bar anymore, guys, but back in the day, we could talk about that after. But I'm joking. But with that being said, the next question. Don't worry, I always keep an 8 bar in my notes just in case when I'm drunk and I need it. But with that being said, the next question is to you, Richard. I wanted to talk to you about your blog. So basically, with British urbanism, Brutalist estates were designed to foster community through shared spaces. Do you think that the music that has come out of them fulfilled the socialist dream, or was it a response to the failure of those spaces?
I think it's an interesting question. I think it's probably a bit of both. I talk a lot about this in my book, and specifically focus on obviously Hackney's council estates and how kind of successive governments and councils kind of led to their decline through a lack of investment, through poor conditions in those estates, and through what I perceive almost a rejection of the working classes in those areas. In some respects, I think estates have, like Reece has already mentioned, given individuals in those areas like a sense of hope, and grime has given that. I remember growing up in my estate in Hackney and seeing Dizzy on Channel U, seeing Legal B on Channel U, tuning into Deja Vu, all that kind of stuff, and thinking, wow, these boys are from estates like 5 minutes away, and they're making it. But in some respects, like, that shouldn't be the story that we have to tell through estates. You know, we shouldn't have been living in those conditions. We shouldn't have had this idea of like survival of the fittest and having to struggle through kind of poor housing, crime, desolation, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, the kind of estates have given us that, I guess, that dual perception of, you know, ultimately we have survived through this carnage, we have survived through these battles, and we have made it. And we've created, through grime, something really beautiful that is sustained for what is it now, over 25 years. And long may it continue. And in some respects, you could argue it is because of those conditions that successive governments put in place. But ultimately, like we shouldn't celebrate those conditions. Like, it isn't, and it wasn't, and it never will be acceptable. But ultimately, that's where we are.
Yeah, it's so important, like, that you brought in like the two different perspectives, because as you said, like the locality of like being from an estate, and then like, you know, whatever area you're from, and then the potential of like bumping into, you know, MC that you really admire is like, wow, like, you know, if he's still in the area, and you know, or he or she, they're still in the area and rapping, and they're local to me, that means that I could do it. Or, you know, like, I don't know, like success is by osmosis. It's a really weird feeling, but yeah, I love that dual perspective. But yeah, thank you so much for that answer. And the next question is to Hattie. You mentioned in your book, This Is Grime, that Dizzy Rascal hadn't left his estate and been into central London until the age of 18? Yeah. Do you think that this isolation fostered creativity or harbored exclusion?
Well, probably to echo Richard, a little bit of both. I mean, there is again, like a long history of some estates being set up so that people weren't supposed to leave them. So you had like the shops, and you had, you know, the schools and youth clubs, and there was an idea of kind of, I suppose, trying to like keep people in. I guess we see that a lot in New York, in those huge, like, expansive kind of projects as they have there, which I guess we don't have quite the same sizes necessarily here in the UK. But so there would have maybe been a part of this. I mean, I can't speak on Dizzy's behalf, but there was possibly an idea that outside of the state wasn't for him, or there was something that there was nothing or being offered to him. But within his estate, I know that he was really, really influenced by a lot of like Dirty South music. So yeah, he didn't maybe travel outside of his part of East London into like the city or the West End or over here, but he was very tapped into via music, the rest of the world, you know, specifically like the Dirty South, and you hear a lot of that influence in his early music. So it may have helped him, it may have hindered him, but I guess it's a bigger social question, as to why he didn't feel able to leave, whether it was resources, whether he felt like, you know, that he wasn't welcome in these places. As I said, I couldn't really answer on his behalf, but I think what happened ultimately was that he made Boy in the Corner, which is, as we know, like a almost perfect kind of record that was part of laying the foundations of what would go on to be grime. And so I guess we have to be thankful for the various decisions that Dizzy made that led him to make an album. And I think one of the things I guess I'd say about him saying on this date, which pertains more to the sound, but I think Target it says somewhere in the book as well that the sound of grime, although it had a lot of influence from like the Dirty South, or there was, you know, all sorts of different plugins that they were using on Fruity Loops, that the kind of that brutalism, the concrete, that sound, that kind of occasional, there's warmth, but that coldness too, that you can feel in Boy in the Corner, was very directly inspired. The sonics were very directly inspired by Estate Life, and like, as I said, Target would talk about that quite often, that they wanted to emulate the sound of the estate, or the feeling of the estate, through sound. So to kind of answer your question, it's a bit of both, but I think that Estate Life has had a really huge impact, not just lyrically, culturally, impacting the clothes, but also sonically too.
Yeah, absolutely. I was having a conversation the other day on how MCs sound different based on where they're from. So I was talking to someone about, like, do you guys think there's a North London accent? Because like I've been having this conversation for ages, and I'm like, people from like Edmonton and Tottenham, they have a certain twang that's like different from East. And I feel like based on where you're from in London, I can immediately tell. And some of my friends are like, I'm 24, but I feel like some of my friends as well, they're like, no, Naz, we don't get, and they're just like, you're just an old head. I'm like, guys, no, I'm not, I promise you, there's a North London accent. So it's interesting that you're mentioning that, because it makes me think of regionality and how like grime, although like it spreads so far, so expansive, there's points of it that I'm like, it's so distinctly East London, and you can hear that. Like I just hear Bow in it, I hear East London in it, and it's interesting that we had this conversation about whether like it harbours isolation or creativity, like, you know, you just making music in your area. But sorry for that little ramble. But on to the next question for the entire panel. Looking back at music videos from the early 2000s to today, how has the portrayal of the estate changed? Do you feel like it's still perceived as like a concrete jungle? Or, you know, we were talking earlier about how like estates are like kind of like aestheticized and, you know, a part of like big photo shoots and, you know, like mood boards and so on and so forth. So what do you think like the estate still represents today?
I think it still depends, to be honest with you. Like you'll see videos from the early 2000s where they're trying to make it sort of depends what the director's trying to do. So like, depending on the type of music, you might have something where they're trying to make it look scary, but then you'll also have videos where, like, I was watching the Crazy Titch I Can See You video the other day, and it's like, people forget how tongue-in-cheek grime was back then as well, and it's like, it's sort of like a comic book. So like, I think it's always depended on what the song is like and what the people are trying to tell. And I also think a lot of MCs back then, they weren't actually given the credit for like how much they were thinking about what they were doing visually, and they were actually telling a story in a way that was a lot more comical than people would let on, if you know what I mean.
The Merkelman video.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like, And grime's thought of as like this like scary genre, and it's like these guys are taking the piss. Like really, it was a bit of fun at times.
I agree with that point completely. If you look at like the early Wiley videos, Dizzy's early videos, they weren't on the blocks. They weren't on the blocks, and I feel like when you look at like a lot of the drill videos today, there's like a glorification of like estates, and as I mentioned before, or what was mentioned before about, I think there's been a reimagination of council estates because of gentrification. They almost appear a bit more sexy, a bit more glorified. Back then in like the early 2000s, late 90s, people were just living in them, and it was just a lived experience rather than like MCs or musicians trying to consciously project the estate life in the videos. And I can remember watching like all the videos in Channel U. I wasn't watching it to see where they were on the blocks. I was just happy to see them on TV. So I think there's a I don't know if it's revisionism or not, but I think it was more in the music, the actual sound, where you could get the feeling of like estate life rather than the visualization. The visualization felt more, going back to the point I was mentioned before about it might have been comical or it might have been influenced by American culture. And I think that there was two sides to grime. There was like the real rawness of like clashing, MCing on the block, Fruity Loops, making beats in your like pirate radio, and then there was like the visual side, which was like Channel U and everything else, and the internet, which was like the more commercial side, in my opinion. Anyway.
Yeah, I think also just from like having worked like not in fashion but at fashion magazines, there was, and even at some of the music magazines as well, there was a horrible period where they would do like editorial on an estate, and like they'd have like $3,000 people in like $3,000 coats and like whatever trousers, and it was just I guess what's changed is that hopefully touch wood, is that magazines kind of wouldn't get away with that now. This sort of the kind of glamorizing or but also just kind of patronizing, and I think that's something that thankfully has changed over time.
I think a couple of the points that were raised is that I think it's like almost two sides of the coin, like because some people on the estate on that kind of comic book superhero vibe, like you said, Crazy Titch, I Can See You, Merkle Man. But then if you look at, say, for example, like Roll Deep's videos, it was fundamentally proud to be where you're from. So you've gone from the era of being on the pirate radio and the mystique of not knowing what an MC looks like unless you saw them in a rave. And then now Channel U came around and it's like, okay, these MCs have been on the radio saying they're from East London, West London, North London, South London. But now it's like the nuances in Tower Hamlets, Bow, compared to Newham, Stratford and Plaistow. This is, I remember like they was calling Limehouse Whitehouse. And I was like, it's bloody Limehouse. Do you know what I mean? But you come there and no one that knew, it was like, oh, Whitehouse, this is where Roll Deep are from. Oh, that's there. But then you go over there in East and it was like Titch's got the dog out and it's all of these things. So it was just everybody representing where they were from. So Solid Crew with Oh No, Just the Little Things. They were letting you know, this is us, this is where we're from, we're on your screens, we're stars, just like the stars in America are from Harlem, from Dirty South, from wherever they are. So I think it's a sense of pride, but then also not to be taking themselves like they're hard done by. It's just like, yo, this is where we're from, you're tuned into us, here we are.
I think as well as like, I agree as well. I feel like it was like cycles and resources as well, because I feel like there's, as I said, like now it's kind of sexy and cool to be from the States and the whole aesthetics of it and stuff like that, but I just feel like back then when we had less resources there was more of a sense to be creative and to do more stories and to do more with music videos. And then there was a cycle that felt like before drill, especially in music, there was like every music video was kind of set up in a way, it was like an apartment with these sort of like models and bottles on the side. It was very like specifically aesthetic with the big cars outside and the big lights and all this sort of stuff. And then when I do kind of feel like when London started to, and the fashion, everything started to come really cool, we started to go kind of back to that of being like showing where we're from, and drill as well I think helped. But I do fundamentally think we, as the music industry itself, to peel back the onion, we're always kind of comparing ourselves to America. So we're looking at what that America's doing and we're trying to recreate in a sort of way to compete with America or to be like, we're on their level or something like that. Until America kind of started to be like, right, we kind of we like London and we like the UK dons and we fucks with it. And so we started to kind of be more inside our own stuff. But even the drill stuff is like, it's Harlem influenced, isn't it? Like when they started seeing them sort of videos and then they started to bring it more to their states and stuff. So I do feel like it's a bit identity crisis mixed with what's trending, mixed with like it's a cocktail of things all together. But I do think it comes down to like cycles and resources. Like we have a lot more at our disposal now to be able to have the choices to do whatever we want. Whereas back in the day, it was like whoever gives us the money to be able to do a music video. And then with that, even that little bit of money, you're kind of thinking, how can I recreate the R&B and rap videos I'm seeing on MTV Base to let me recreate Channel U, do you know what I mean? And I do think that was even like a white, you know, the white studio setting for a music video where it's like a green screen sort of thing, that was seen as like big money sort of stuff, but unless it's done properly now, it looks almost a bit tacky, you know, so it's just cycles, resources, things like we've all got iPhones now and gimbals and, do you know what I mean? It's like, there's a sense of the need for content is like helping us, and the internet and what we can see is helping us like be able to be ourselves in comfortably, more than giving us a little bit of change and saying what can you do to the best of your ability with this smaller budget instead of having an unlimited budget, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think like you're saying as well, I can only be sort of more specific with East London because it's the area that I knew because I was in Bethnal Green at the time. But I think there's something as well to be said about the proximity of Shoreditch and Limehouse and the Free Flats, and how like this kind of around 2004, 2005 there was things like Grindy and like New Rave and Chantel's Rave, like straight out of Bethnal. Like there was this quite kind of interesting confluence between fashion, art and music, and people like Skepta and JME and Jammer I think were quite interested in it. And so when you would start seeing people like Cassette Player who was making clothes at the time, or Kesh who was making clothes at the time, and yeah, sort of how like, and some of those people were also from estates. There were some people that weren't, so there were some of the designers that were from, you know, lots of different backgrounds, and kind of Boy Better Know would turn up in their roller skates with their Boy Better Know t-shirts, and like Kesh would be like, oh, I can customise that for you. So there was also this, I think just, again, quite specific to East London, but the clash of cultures, and I guess the clash of classes around the sort of mid-noughts was quite an interesting time for grime in the estates, and how those worlds kind of, well, how people stopped looking to America and started looking at British culture, British art, British fashion, and grime I think was brilliant at sort of, already had its own identity and sort of like maybe magpied a little bit of other things that were going on and that made sense to them, and sort of put them all into a little melting pot.
That lyric from Skepta was like, I used to wear Gucci,
put it all in the
bin. Like it's quite mad when you deep, like when Skepta was having his main run back, like before, it was all LV and Gucci, like, do you know what I'm saying? So that just kind of shows like the cycles that I'm kind of talking about, and do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's interesting that we're talking about hyper-locality, because the next question is going to be about pirate radio. But yeah, as you said, like fashion now, like we have different brands that represent like the UK, and a lot of people are kind of dressing like, some of our largest streetwear brands are basically like referencing grime, in my opinion. So it's interesting, as you said, how cycles come about, because the way that we're all dressing, all of the drops that we're seeing, you know, I think Cortez, namely, you know, they've got that jacket with crazy titch on it, and for ages it was like an image that I thought only me and my batch knew, because I was from Yellow Flats and I lived in Stratford, you know what I mean? So when I was like, oh wait, actually everyone knows crazy titch, I was kind of like blown by that, and then seeing like the amount of people that really bought that jacket and like wear it and represent that because they know who Titch is as well. And it just, yeah, it just makes you think about like the expansiveness of grime. So yeah, I guess the next question, because we're talking about like culture and everything that's come from grime, one of the most important things is pirate radio. So before the internet, pirate radio was hyper-local. How did the signal radiance of a specific tower define which neighborhoods shared a specific sound? Like when you think about pirate radio coming out at the time, how did you recognize that artists were from different places without them necessarily having to state it? Was it through the way that they spoke or the way that they dressed? And yeah, I just want to know your thoughts.
Typically what happened with pirate radio, the first time I actually listened to pirate radio in a UK sense with Jungle and all that was in school, and you didn't necessarily know where the artist was from area-wise. You knew the station and where the station would broadcast to. So Cool FM was the top jungle station, and Rinse FM was basically made because everyone that wanted to get on Cool FM wasn't good enough, or you know, it was kind of gate-kept to a point. So Cool FM was based in Hackney, but wherever the area was transmitting from, it would hit south, it would hit East London, like. So I went to school in South London, and everyone had the tape. Skibbity, we knew Skibbity was from South London because he was local. We kind of knew Shabba was from Hackney because local people spoke of. So it was almost like the urban legend of the area. Like, oh, Wiley, he's from Thingy, that's Thingy's cousin from over there. But listening to the twang, because everyone, especially with jungle, everything was quite fast. You couldn't really tell where it's from. And then fast forward to like Rinse FM and Deja, you knew, again, typically East London, South East London, the area would go so far and then would struggle maybe in further parts. So when you look at So Solid Crew, they were from Battersea. The Light FM, that was more southwest. So they would beam over there because you're literally, for the younger people in the room, you had a dial and you was literally just doing this little circle thing, and every time you little tweak, you might hear something go through. So you got like Kiss FM on 100.0, but Rinse is 100.3, and you twist it and you hear it. Now, depending where you are, like Rinse was across the road from me, so I'm getting Rinse clean. But in another place, you might have to put the hanger in, then put your hand on the hanger, and then use the electric in your body. So all of this just to make sure that area was being maintained, you tape for like, you say, all right, I'm gonna hold the hanger for 2 hours, but then once the tape's done, I'm good. And that was the difference with when I was on Y2K, which was previously Chicago FM when Heartless Crew first came up. And that was based in Archway. So that would be 90.6, but mainly North London. And then every now and again, I remember being on the radio because maybe like 9 to 11 on Rinse was like the primetime show. So Pay As You Go was typically on there. But then on Deja, it was like 8 to 10, which was a primetime show. And I remember one time the phone just started ringing more than usual. And I'm saying, yo, what, go on? And then when people like Major Ace or Target was calling in, I said, what are you doing calling? He goes, DTI's hit us. So DTI would have swooped in one area, swooped Rinse, swooped Deja, and then somehow, I don't know how it really affected the dial, but more people had to turn the knob a difference, because you kind of knew where the stations were. Choice FM was 96.9, and they'd be like, oh, this is Garage, Grime, yo, we're gonna listen to that MC's good. Then you kind of hear the shout outs from the station and where people were based, but typically you knew where the station was from rather than the MCs. I think that came later with the music videos, because you recognise the area going Win Stanley, you know, Limehouse, Plasto, and that's how Pirate Radio was more the community of where the radio was based.
That's such a good point, and I think my favourite point of reference for that, because I grew up with Channel U, but I think Pirate Radio was just before me, so my favourite point of reference is watching dubplate drama, because you really see, like, when people are seeing Pirate Radio, I'm like, okay, like, you're trying, like, you did the radio yourself, but like, you're not really gauging that people are actually, like, their arms are up like this for hours trying to, you know, get the signal, and then, like, you know, when you have your own radio at home, you're trying to do the signal too, you're trying to make sure that, like, there's no static. So when people say Pirate Radio, there was a real DIY effort, and, you know, sometimes people were knocking down other stations so that they could get all of the people tuning into theirs, and there was like that competitive energy there. So yeah, I think that's like my favourite point of reference, because you're really watching the graph that goes into making a station, and, you know, the MCs that are coming through and trying to spit. And, you know, my favourite clips are of Shiesty when she gives her dub plate and she's like, you know, I'm going to shell it down. She does, but like, there's an effort that she has to go through to do that, and, you know, it's so layered. But yeah,
completely
that's such a great
what
answer.
Graham Dennis mentioned about, because I don't think people understand the pirate radio days and having to kind of wait for your favourite MC to come on. But I think what is really different about now is access, and, you know, we can go online right now on YouTube, wherever it is, and search your favourite MC and find it. Back then, and going back to the point you mentioned around, like, people saying where they're from, like, if Wiley came on the station, I knew he was like 10 minutes away. If Pay As You Go was on, I know they're like 10, 20 minutes away. Obviously I know like Cool FM and all them guys were in Hackney, but just knowing you had MCs that were local was like different to what you might have got on like Choice or something else, which was like the kind of mainstream urban DJs, MCs, whatever it may be. But kind of an additional point is probably around 2003, 2004, all of a sudden people just started repping their postcode, like out of nowhere. And
Facts.
yeah, it went from like people talking about their crew, Nasty Crew, Pay As You Go, Roll Deep, whatever it is, E3, E9, E8, E5, whatever it may be. And obviously that was linked to kind of other things that were happening at that time. But like repping your ends just exploded out of nowhere. And I don't really know what the crux of it was. Maybe it was the clashing and people clashing, going to different ends to clash. But the kind of identity and the link between your estate, but then more widely your postcode, just like exploded around 2003, 2004, which really, I think, gave life to like a new sense of belonging around grime, estates, your area, everything else.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add to what you just said about the, when you said everyone's repping their postcode. What I saw at the time, like obviously garage was the big thing in 2000, 2001, So Solid charted. And outside of So Solid being mainstream, the big crew was like Heartless Crew. And then at some point everyone realised, you know, it was about being a crew. So Pay As You Go ended up being Pay As You Go just by default. Wiley was DJing at the time with Target, and Maxwell D was Ladies Hit Squad. Wiley made No Way, a couple other MCs were on there, and it was just like, oh, let's just do Pay As You Go. And then fast forward a couple months, you had like Nasty Crew, Meridian Crew, Russ Squad, and everyone at this point had decided to be in a crew, which fundamentally meant you're going to rep your postcode. So that was just what.
And I feel like as well, like following on from what you're saying about the postcode things and linking that to like the estate life and everything. Obviously, like when I talk to the younger generation now about their experience of living in London and what the perception of London is from the people that live outside of London, they think that like now is like crazier or like it's more dangerous than like back in the day when the postcode things were popping off. But like that postcode, London was different back then. It was like you couldn't even walk with like iPhone headphones. Like when someone knew that you had an iPhone, you're gonna get robbed, innit? Like I grew up in North, and like where I lived and went to school, it was like Wood Green and Hornsey beef and Tottenham and Wood Green, and you couldn't like being associated with each other was like. Do you know what I mean? It was crazy. Like it was real beef and like really dark Edmonton as well with the beef and like Axe FM that made like that pirate radio set like the clashes that were going on in there. They made them like deeper and it had like a bigger like backdrop into like the narrative. And yeah, I just think like back then London actually felt kind of dangerous, like going certain places at night or not knowing someone and going certain places. Whereas now, I feel like you're relatively safe. I don't really feel in danger wherever I'm going, walking with whatever iPhone on the phone, whatever. It's like back then it was like, it was a bit different. It was a bit danger on the roads. Like.
That's a good point. I think I always say the same. Like I always feel like when it comes to like postcodes and whatever, like I'm really proud of where I'm from. I'm from Stratford. Naz from Newham is literally my name. But then like there was a point where I was like, I didn't really want to be associated with Newham. You know, because of how difficult it was being from there. I went to school in Canning Town, but I lived in Stratford, and a lot of my friends, it was the same thing. But I think, you know, as we were saying earlier, you know, that changes as you get older. There's that sense of pride of where you're from, and you know, that's why I love listening to grime, because there's that sense of innate pride of everyone being where they're from. Because we're on the topic of pirate radio, you've mentioned jungle a few times. I actually want to talk about other genres related to grime as well. So let's talk about like some of your relationships with UKG, with drill, jungle and dubstep, and their relationships with pirate radio. If you have any anecdotes that you'd love to share with the audience, because my favourite way to talk about music is by telling the story.
Okay, yeah, I started doing jungle. I remember in school when I first heard it, I was just like, oh, it's nonsense. And then it was just that kind of typical thing, like, whatever, da 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 da. And then I think General Levy did Incredible.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool. I was like, oh, okay. And that's typical, I think, when music transcends the genre. If you hear it and go, that's a big song, and then someone goes, oh, that happens to be jungle, oh, that happens to be grime. That's when you know the song is a proper song. And then it turned out that I went to school with Target and Dom P. So basically we're all local, and I made a tape with my cousin to get on the radio. That was what you used to do. If you went to get on the pirate radio was like it was like TV then. So you're like, okay, how do you get on pirate radio? goes, all right, you've got to make a tape and then find someone that's thing. So it just turned out I knew Wiley, and I was like, all right, Will, like, how do I? He goes, oh, we'll give a tape, we'll give it to this guy who was at Rinse. So me and Wiley did a tape together. He helped me do a tape, gave the tape to get on Rinse. And then Nikki Slimting, we went to the same college. And it's just, again, proximity is mad. When you've got an energy channel towards something, no matter what you do, you start walking down a road, you're going to start seeing more of this. So if you want to be a little rude boy, all of a sudden you're going to have more altercations and this and that. So Slim was on Cool FM as a DJ, and then he decided he wanted to do an under 21s rave. So he called it Rumble. And it was the best and the worst thing at the same time, because what he would do, he'd have jungle MC, so you'd have like people like me and Wiley that was on Rinse at the time, but then you'd have Skibbity and Shabba, jungle, but then Pay As You Go, Heartscrew were emerging. So this was like almost like a multi-genre rave in some of the hottest places. So I'm talking Club EQ, which is Waterden Road, Hackney, Stratford, and like you talk about the dynamics of beef. Some people from Hackney could have beef with Stratford, some people from Stratford could be having beef with Bow, and you never knew what you was going to get. But then, because it was such a promoted rave, people from South were coming. But you've got to understand that people from South London have their own problems. So I went to school in like near Lewisham, and you learned that Lewisham have got a problem with Peckham. Peckham have got a problem with Brixton. Oh, by the way, they're all coming to Rumble. So they all come to Rumble. And now you're in Temple. I remember one time it was in Temple, the rave's gone off, blah, 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 and it's just kicked off outside. And the police have ended up phoning me, because my number was on a flyer to help promote the rave. And it was like, oh, do you know anything about the security? It was like, no, we need to find a promoter of the rave. And it was like, this kind of outlet that people wanted to come and party had a dark side to it as well. And I think those early stages are elements that remain in grime today. Like, you know, I'd go on record to say Rumble was the first first grime rave. Rumble, Young Man Standing, and Stampede. And Young Man Standing was a Deja Vu rave, which was the child's version of Last Man Standing, which was just a typical garage rave, but we needed something for the under 18s, under 21s, because at the time I think Diesel was like 20. So they all link. They from Windrush, Bashment, and parents that come down with their kids, to sound system culture, being on jungle radio stations, to them realising jungle's turning into drum and bass, we don't like the sound, there's more activity in garage, there's a flood of people in garage, then, you know, the older heads are looking, there's a separation, and then that eventually leads into grime, and here we are today, basically.
Do you know what I think's quite interesting as well? Like, so me, I'm 20 years old, so I was really there for the resurgence of grime. I wasn't even born in like 2003, 2004. What I did remember watching, right, was, I remember seeing this group, right, from Dagenham, right? So back in the day, Dagenham was a weird place, right? But before I was born, it used to be all white, BMP, like proper, like, that's what it was like fully. When I was growing up round there, it was completely different. Like, it was like really, really diverse. But I remember watching stuff probably when I was about 12 or 13, being shown this crew called Dagenham Alliance, right? Whereas before, I'd only ever seen like grime. There was Channel U, and then it went to AKA. It went to Channel AKA. I was watching it on there. There was no one that looked like me. Like, even though I was living on an estate, I was like, there's no one that looks or really sounds like me or my dad, for example. My dad's proper Cockney, do you know what I mean? There's no one who sounded like us, but we're a part of that. And this Dagenham Alliance come through, right? And it's all these white geezers, like proper Dagenham geezers, yeah, getting on the grime, right? And you're thinking, damn, like, these are the type of guys that I see just blasting house and like that really shit white people reggae music on the estate. But now they're getting in, they're getting on the grime as well. And I remember seeing that, and these are old videos, yeah. But even seeing like Devlin, these people who beforehand were big in sort of like the Romford house music scene, like seeing them come into grime was like, it made it like it was said before, like it's an inclusive space, and like this regionality of it was not only spreading between genres, because you know so much of the house lot then moved on to rapping on like grime. It made you think this is going between races. You know, at that point in time where, like I said, Dagenham was a BNP stronghold. Politically, it was like extremely racist back then, but there was still things that were being shared between cultures, and they transcended just genres at that point. And so I think, yeah, that was really interesting. And now hearing a lot of the grime rappers that I've grown up with, or just UK rappers, for example, like your Morrisons from Newham, he's now jumped onto so many house beats. It's like, yeah, these regional things that were so big there and felt kind of unique to there, they just kind of got broken down. And then obviously it's evolved, and we've got another resurgence of people going back onto house. But yeah, I just thought it was a really weird and unique place. I think down in South East London as well, like Orpington, Bexley, Thamesmead, around there, I think they sort of went through a similar thing from what I've heard. But yeah, that was like my relationship with it.
Yeah, it's a great story.
I think there's been a few evolutions or like relationships like with grime. I feel like obviously with like what you're saying with house and garage, it's more like playful and happy, and grime was like coming on and being able to talk stuff like raw actual lyrics, whereas the garage stuff was quite gimmicky. I even remember like on garage when they were doing American accents and stuff like that, you know? So we come a long way. And then I remember like the period when like what you were saying with Tinchy, and like that was kind of when I was coming through in music like professionally. I remember sitting in like label meetings and they were like saying, you've got to make a song like this, and it was like that shocking, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like that, we were trying to make like pop, like it was like that N-Dubs, Tinchy Strider era of like when they just went from grime into like into them charts, and it was just shocking sort of music going on in there. That was like an evolution we had. Like we had, what else was there? There's been a few, because I even feel like with German Wit and that like second resurgence, that rebirthed a lot, like with when you look at the people that are here today, and off the back of like Radar Radio, and that's where I kind of come from as well. Like I was managed by them after AJ Tracy and stuff, and like seeing kind of from the ground up, like every single person that was in that building is like the industry now, you know, like Zoo, Shy, like literally everyone. I could literally list off about 20 names, and I just feel like we're gonna keep evolving, and there's gonna be like more cycles, but from the jungle to garage to whatever that shocking little period we had into like where we are today, we're in a good place, and I feel like people are a bit more open to hearing the realness.
Yeah,
now.
of course. I feel like we always focus on like the past, but I think grime is like ever evolving. There's so many different iterations of it, because like I'd say my main entry point, same as you, was definitely like grime 2.0. You know, when I heard Novelist for the first time, that's when I was really, really excited by grime, because I was like, I can grow up with it now, like I can go to the raves and I can be outside with everyone, because I think that's the best way for grime to be experienced, like through radio, yeah, but like you need to be in these functions, you need to be with everyone, you need to hear an MC lose their voice box and think, what's happening? Do you know what I mean? So yeah.
And just quickly as well, I've got to shout out like Brum as well,
Of
like
course.
Birmingham. I feel like when grime kind of went through a period where like I kind of missed out a little period, because it was like before that genre of like pop, there was the gigs and the rap, and that was like the evolution between when grime was quite gimmicky and like sound effects and like them sort of like comic book tunes, like kind of like what you were saying, into chatting stuff, and when like grime was almost like ridiculed a lot in that period where like rap was the cool thing, and Birmingham in that time basically carrying the whole of grime on its back. Like that was where grime was, like if you wanted authentic grime and authentic MCs and clashing radio, all of that stuff, it was like, that's what I was watching when I was still into grime. I was watching like Flush Raw, P110, like these sort of channels, and seeing like the JKs and the Invasion Alerts and the Stay Freshes, like they held up grime a lot and inspired a generation when people were getting inspired by rappers and drillers and American people into kind of almost helped the grime 2.0 that you're talking about almost come off the back of grime in Birmingham. Like,
yeah, of course, and like across the Midlands and up north, because you have like people in Nottingham, you had people as well in like Liverpool, so on and so forth. And like, you know, I think the most interesting thing about grime is like it's not just UK based. You know, sometimes I watch sets from people borrowing in Japan or borrowing in Brazil, and it just shows you something that was birthed by essentially children in an estate in East London, and it being like 14 hours across the world. It's mind blowing.
So I just wanted to add quickly.
Of course.
One key thing that I think that made like grime to the masses was Channel U.
Of course.
Because I was fortunate to be in the proximity of the stuff that's happening. You know, when people go, oh, you're from London, like, oh, London's so cool. It's just I don't put my parents here, that's where I am. So I say like, it was typically, grime's always focused on East London, Roll Deep, this and that, Nasty Crew. Everyone was basically on Deja. But then when Channel U came, it was like, all right, if you now got your money to get your video on there, you were seeing people from Wolves, we're seeing people from Birmingham.
Yeah.
And it's that now, the kind of culture was, if you're good enough, people will phone up for your video. Now, if you see all your mates, it's still the same thing, which I kind of liken it to today. If we all uploaded something in the room, the likes and the comments give you your feedback loop.
Yeah.
And that was what Channel U was doing, so you could now see people all across the nation and whatnot. Now the internet now lets you see Brazil, Japan, and obviously there's going to be haters and whatnot, but fundamentally you're going to get the baseline of, oh, this is cool, blah, 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 blah. And I definitely think Channel U played a big role in that.
Yeah, just to add to that, I would say, like, as an outsider, that's kind of what's interesting to me now is like you had all these people in London planting seeds, and then, you know, there was a grime scene in Newport and Cardiff when I was growing up, but that's fucking laughable to people. But then now you have like people like Local, Window Kid, like people who, you know, these seeds were planted 15, 20 years ago, and maybe for a while these sort of regional grime scenes were a bit of a laughing stock. And then now it's like, you know, Birmingham, Sheffield, Cardiff, Bristol, all these places, you're getting stars coming out of them now, and that's like, you know, considering how much the genre's not been supported by the UK media and the music industry, it's like, it's a testament to how incredible it was. This thing that was happening in a tiny little place in East London is now like, you're getting stars, which you're getting Scottish grime MCs, like, it's crazy.
And that's the full circle though, when we're talking about like grime being inclusive, and it's not just about like, obviously it comes from London, but it's all about people that kind of with limited choices and a lot to say, with not the biggest voice and limited resources, come together and say something, and that's something that everyone can relate to, no matter where you're from or what area you're from or what part of the UK or what part of the world you're from. Like, you can relate to that, and it brings people together, you know.
Yeah, like white kids in Newport they're relating to that more than they were relating to any other music, and people, you know, it looks mental to people, but it's because they're living the same life, but they just happen to be from a slightly different background, you know.
Yeah,
So,
of course. I guess, like, the next question would be to you, Dave. You know, what is it like to personally be that person filming music videos in the States that a lot of these kids are like watching, you know, and a lot of people are relating to? What's that process like in itself?
I wish I had like an interesting story of getting like chased off in the state, but it's only ever been like, I think that's the thing, people will try and, especially in the media, they'll try and make it look like these places are like these big scary boogeyman places, but when you go there, it's just people living day to day every life, you know.
Yeah.
And also you're probably with the people who were going to cause trouble. So that's like a thing which is avoiding it. And also I shoot a lot on my own, so I don't, the problems which you would run into is like getting a permit, but I've never got a permit in my life to film anywhere, so I've never really had an issue with filming anywhere, to be honest.
Can I just add on to that, like, having been, me and Gianna, we've been to probably 75 to 80% of all the estates in London.
Wow.
And tried to like represent them in one way or another.
Yeah.
And thing is, when I first started posting it, I remember I went to Kilburn, right? Because I knew people who were doing urban exploring. and they were like, "You've got to see this estate, it's mental, it's just been left, like it's abandoned." It was so mental that I took pictures and posted it, and it blew up. And at first I was thinking, oh, this is sick, because I come from an estate as well, and people actually want to see this like online. And then then people started to say, oh, this is where we used to play, and this is what we used to. So then I started thinking like, oh, a lot of these places, despite like nowadays, like you see a lot of fashion shoots, a lot of films, they're filmed in estates. The actual significant places, which may even just be like a particular bench on a park in the middle of an estate, that can have mad like meaning to people who live in that area. So nowadays we go around with people who can show us like what's significant about this, what do you want shown on this estate, and knowing that people are watching it and saying, oh my days, I used to live on this estate, they're commenting, I used to live on this estate in the 1990s, and the milkman used to refuse to go there on his milk shift because it was that bad. Do you know what I mean? Like seeing people relate to it, honestly, that's why I do it now. I don't do it like to get views, neither of us do it to get views. It's a passion, and seeing that people can actually, you know, have their memories evoked by what we're showing. Like even places that, like I said, the media might miss. It might just be a particular corner on an estate where everyone used to chill, or a particular bit of graph that everyone's like, I don't know, means a lot to people. Like I think that is really important, because especially because it's a thing that's kind of coming to an end now. Like the estate as we know it now is changing so much, and so it's nice to be able to represent that in our art and give people memories that they may have otherwise forgotten.
Do you want to add anything onto that, Gigi? Because I was just talking about like, you know, what does it need to like represent these estates in your art? That's what we're talking about.
So it started off just meaning something to me, because the first estate I drew was was a memory from where I grew up, and then I suppose it snowball affected into something that became important just because of the attention it got, and I started to realise that, because it's in the beginning I thought, okay, I'm going to draw my estate because this garage song reminded me of where I grew up, so I drew it and then I posted it, and loads of people were like, oh, this reminds me of where I grew up, and then what was I going to say, sorry, and then it started to become like, okay, I actually want to make young people especially be proud to be where they're from, because like what you guys were saying earlier, I was also really embarrassed because I went to a school with a lot of rich kids, and I was just like, there's no way you're coming to my house because you're just not going to be my friend anymore, you know what I mean? But now I feel like with the art that I do, and also it's not just about representing your estate, it's also about representing the working class in the art world, because that is a space where people who are from poor backgrounds are not well represented. It's very like one thing, but very one class. It's just, you know, because art is more for the upper class because they have more time and resources to actually make art. I just kind of want to inspire people to create, and also to, you know, be proud to be working class. I think it's important. We shouldn't be punished, and I feel like we're just constantly punished for being poor. You know, it's not fair.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you as well for Subreezhy joining us. You're also an artist, and I want you to jump in these questions because I'm just throwing it at you all, but I expect you to all participate and feel comfortable to answer. I'm going to ask a last question because I know some of you are like, you've been dying to ask something, so we're going to have the opportunity afterwards. The last question that I have is kind of like on reflecting on estates and, you know, the homes that we come from, whether it's, you know, lived experiences, or, you know, you're someone who like just is an artist and just captures these areas. What is your favorite estate, and why should it be included in like musical heritage?
Do you know what?
I left them starstruck, guys.
I'm going to jump in, yeah. I'm going to say Aylesbury Estate down in Walworth, because not only does it look mental, it looks like proper Soviet. Like I went to Serbia like a year ago or 2 years ago, and I was like, it's just Aylesbury Estate on a mass scale. Do you know what I mean? Like, not only that, for me personally, it's means a lot because I've got Latino heritage on my mum's side, and obviously all around Elephant and Castle, that's where a lot of like Latino and Hispanic people used to congregate. So I think that makes it really important. I think the fact that it shows brutalism in its rawest form. Like, people will say, oh, where shall I go to see brutalism in London? They'll see the Barbican. Don't get me wrong, architecturally, completely. But when you look at somewhere like Aylesbury Estate, you walk out of Burgess Park or you walk from Elephant and Castle, you see these huge blocks. Like, you see these walkways, these bridges all connected to like one another. And this is like, yeah, this is what brutalism looked like when it was made for the working class. This is the real effect that it had. Like, I love brutalism personally, but there's no doubt that in some places it was a bit of a failed experiment. And and when you go and look at that and you just see these monolithic buildings, like, I just think it's mental. And the amount of stories that must be on all them walkways. There's not many estates where all the walkways are anymore, because all the police, they all knocked them all down because they encouraged antisocial behaviour. People could gather above the street level and run away from the police and all, and you know,
Streets
on
in
all
the
these
sky.
streets in the sky.
Yeah.
And so I think Aylesbury, I just think it is the most mental place. Like, you go there, it's nice to walk around these days. It's not what I heard about it back in the day. But yeah, it's just mental. Like, if you take anyone there who ain't been there, they'll just be like, what? I didn't even know this existed in the UK.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Thamesmead for me, because it's like you say, people are still living there, whereas a lot of the other blocks have become like so gentrified that you go there and it's not who it was meant for, if that makes sense. Whereas Thamesmead, it feels to me still like a place where normal working class people are living.
Not for long, they're knocking it
no,
down.
yeah, they're getting rid of a lot of it, but they're like, right now, just visually, as well as like the fact that it's not just a load of rich people living there. It feels that's the one to me.
Visually, I wouldn't say an estate per se. I think I'd go for a tower block, and it would be Balfron Tower, but on the flip side, I almost put them as a pair, Balfron Tower and Trellick Tower, because Trellick Tower overlooks Carnival and what it stands for there, and anyone that goes to Carnival, you know that building. But if you're from East London, Balfron Tower was, like I said, the rig for Rinse FM. It overlooks the whole of East London. And then there's probably an argument for free flats, for the meaning
for what
of what have come out there. And then probably an honourable mention for So Solid Crew and the Winstanley estate. I just think those estates are pivotal to the culture of what came from garage to grime.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone have
I'm going to say,
you go
I'm going to say something quite controversial to my dad's opinion, right? Because he actually grew up there. But and again, it's not really specifically an estate, but I think most of the manor are all through between Limehouse, Poplar, Whitechapel. Like, that's for me, because of the memories that I have there. More so actually the memories my parents had there. I've just always felt such a mad connection to that area, and I think the sad thing is the gentrification. Like, even just down to the 20 miles per hour, all their roads have been cut off from, used to being able to go down the back roads and travel through their routes, and now most of them places are now shut off. You have to stick to the main road. But I think just mainly for the culture and for the honour that was around those times, like before even I was born in 2001. But around those years where I was still living in London, I remember feeling like that was it for me. This is where I'm at. This is the community base, and all my family live from here to Hackney. Like, it was amazing. And I think over the years, since I moved out of London, I actually moved to Chelmsford. It really gave me the maddest flip side, like retrospective of the manor to like what now in the area I live in, they're called this an estate, and to me this is like countryside with a couple of houses, do you know what I mean? So to be able to like merge the two together, I would say that man, I think you underestimate your own area, like when you move out and things, and then it's only when you go back you realise how much everything has completely changed and moved on. And do you know what, even going back to something you guys were both saying, about
how the music kind of moved from those spaces. I think that was why. Like, gentrification happened in such a massive way, so quickly, that I think people were angry. And the sound started to, the frequency of that era started to shift towards that anger. That's when the clashing got bigger. And even though it was a part of a massive culture that people really enjoyed and respected, slowly the young boys from the manor, and even the young girls, because people underestimate the girl gangs in East London as well, and most of London, but I think everybody started to feel this sense of like, this is my manor, this is where I'm from, like, I need to rep my postcode, because everything around them was slowly changing. Whereas when you do go up to places like Birmingham, Sheffield, I've done a lot of shows in Sheffield, and I would feel now in Sheffield how I probably would have felt back in the day if I was growing up in the ends, do you know what I'm saying? Now I feel that whole energy up there where they still represent that culture and that side, and I think it's because the gritty sides of their areas are still there. Like, most of the is just empty, abandoned buildings. Like, there's not really much going on, but the scene of the sound is still being represented based on where people are from, and I think they actually still hold quite a lot of honour up there. Whereas, yeah, I think nowadays it's sad when I walk through, like, even Isle of Dogs, that, oh my gosh, like, when I look back at the old photos of where my mum and dad used to just roam with their little cruise, and the cruise, and the cruise, and it's mad because there's nothing familiar about it, but I still sense and feel that place of home, and almost sometimes longing. Like, I've got 2 older brothers, and they lived in those sides of the ends for much longer than I got to, do you know what I'm saying? So sometimes I look at them, and now where I'm spending a lot more time back in London than I probably did in the first 15 years of my life, it's like I want to pull them with me, but at the same time I'm like, oh, there's nothing for you here, it's completely different. Like, it's just crazy to me that how things have so swiftly changed. And I think even in my generation of young people, I guess still, there are still a lot of us who are trying to pay homage to that sound, to that frequency, whatever it was that our elders actually held down. I don't think for a single second that gentrification is going to wind that out. I think people are going to start craving that raw, authentic sound. And it is unfortunate that obviously, I don't want to say it's unfortunate, but a lot of people are influenced by a lot of different things nowadays, and social media has played a massive role in that. I think people look at like the old heads as like, oh, you man are just ghetto now, like, you don't really know nothing, but they forget just how much of like British culture has been put into this sound, and they've gentrified it with all this other new sounds that is not really anything to do, I feel like, with the rawness of what grime really was. But at the same time, I will stay like optimistic and say that I think, yeah, as crazy and as upsetting gentrification can be, there's going to be a new age of artists, and there is actually a new age, a massive scene of young rappers, MCs, proper cold MCs coming up right now that I think are going to pull it back. And I think a lot of the elders, even like my uncle is actually Jermaine, he was a part of a group back in the day called Bomb Squad, and they're still kind of in the scene right now. Hat Baker, obviously, he's doing amazing, he's just touring around, but he's in a completely different genre now. Do you know what I'm saying? He doesn't even, they don't make grime anymore. They're now on the indie sound and bringing people in through that sound, and they're still talking about their uprising and being in the ends and, you know, their stories, but they've changed the sound now to something more, I guess, like inclusive. Like I was saying, that you don't have to just stick to that genre, do you know what I'm saying? And yeah, I think that based on artists doing that and progressing with sound, not just like letting go of everything they knew, but actually evolving it into something new, is what's going to inspire the next generation to actually want to keep it alive, I was saying. So yeah.
Does anyone else want to add on to what's their favourite estate?
I was just going to be biased and say Nightingale Estate in Hackney.
Of course.
And just, the only reason I say that is it basically was the origins of like jungle music,
of course,
pirate radio, Cool FM, Rush FM, Fantasy FM, Shabba D, all the other DJs. Like that was like a precursor to grime. So obviously Nightingale went down in 98, 2000, kind of the early signs of gentrification in East London. But at the very least, it provided a platform for those grime MCs to start setting up their own stations in Yeboah with Reece and Deja and all the rest of it. So yeah, Nightingale.
That's a good one. Anyone else want to add?
All the best ones been taken.
I'm going to say Pell Street, which is where I used to live with Chantal, who was a lot more sociable than me. So when we were writing a lot about grime in the early days, she would invite everyone over. I still have friends on there that live there, so I actually was there a few weeks ago. And when I walked back into the flat is actually unchanged really since me and Shan lived there, which is nearly 20 years ago. But without sort of sounding very name droppy, it is a bit name droppy, but like, you know, we would have Wiley would come over, Titch, like we would just do interviews at our house, just like, yeah, you come to mine, we could chill. We would all go out to whatever, like Plastic People, whatever the rave was at the time, and people would come back to ours. So I have so many, Terror Danger, rest in peace, like he passed away quite recently, like I think Dot Rotten came by one time, you know, there was a lot of people that were in the flat, and talking about gentrification, all those things, yeah, that place has not been immune to it, but it's relatively unchanged from when we lived there like almost 20 years ago. And yeah, so I've got loads of happy memories of just those early years of legends kind of coming by and us doing interviews. And we never got around to it. We were going to do wine tasting with Wiley. That was going to be our thing. And do you know what? You look at Chicken's shop day, I was like, shit, we should have filmed it. But we were too lazy to get our shit together and film stuff. And then people like Jamal came through and started videoing. We were like, oh yeah, we could have done that. But yeah, I have some great memories of those early years with drinking wine with Wiley.
And that's why it's so important to kind of share these, because I guess in the practice of doing this, what we all recognise is that this is archival practice. Like this is literally oral histories among each other, and like via osmosis, through you telling like us these stories, we can pass it on to other people so that they remember these estates and that we can, you know, lobby for them to be kept up.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind, guys.
Speaking of wine tasting, me and Alfie went to, what was the estate called? Somerset Estate?
When?
Summer later?
No, it was in Battersea yesterday.
No, that was like Winstanley around there.
No. The last one we went to. Something.
Mate.
I'll find out the name. Anyway, we was documenting this estate.
It was Somerset Estate. It was
Sunset, something like that. Anyway, we was documenting this estate, and we was like, oh look, yeah, there's a pub, we can sit down and have a drink. And then as we got closer, we realised it was a bloody wine tasting restaurant. And then we was like, in the middle of an estate, like that makes no sense. But yeah, that's gentrification.
That actually is
literally.
I don't know, I live in the block and I love me some orange wine.
Yeah, but do you know what? There's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just like
and a piece of toast. But I don't need a coffee shop on every corner.
Yeah,
I don't need you to take out the old businesses that have been there running for years and years and years. Old elderly people that are growing up here, they're used to their community. They're doing things like changing the bus numbers. Why are you doing that? Because you're changing the roads and you're changing the way people get to commute and be a community to begin with, and that's where it all starts. Like, you could go outside and go and get yourself some nice fresh wine, but I would rather do that for my local boss man who's got the nice fresh wines coming in because I asked him to import it. Do you know what I'm saying? So it is crazy. It's crazy.
I think that's like the double-edged sword with kind of gentrification, because I feel like with the rise in popularity and with the swag and everyone wanting to get interested and us like giving more information on the estates, it's gentrification. Half of it is like, I don't know, like where I've lived in the same area in London, like around in Haringey basically, like, and I'm seeing like new builds everywhere being built next to everything, and like I've kind of lived in the same apartment for the last like 5-6 years, and it's like a revolving doors of people, my neighbours moving in and out, but the only consistent thing is that we don't really have that many conversations. Like I'd go to be like, oh hey, like how are you, or like normal things, but it's kind of like, it's a bit offish, but because they've got no intention of being here to stay or building anything, they're just here to sample London and keep it moving and say, yeah, I lived in London for a couple of years. And that's kind of where, like back in the day, it weren't really like that, where people were here because they've got nowhere else to go and this is their home or whatever. Now people are trying to come to the ends to sample it.
I think on that note, it's important as well to kind of like highlight a lot of the estates that we're talking about do have like GoFundMes or pages that where they lobby as communities, where you can sign petitions and, you know, kind of like exercise your political right to ensure that these buildings stay up, because as well as us talking about like their musical heritage, these places are homes, you know, people live in them, and you know, they deserve that respect of staying up as well. Like we were talking about carpenters earlier, it's been derelict for how long? The people that have been pushed out could have been there. So it's important to kind of reflect on that. I fear that we have run out of time, but what we can do is, if some of you are happy to stay behind and like talk to anyone in the crowd that has any questions to ask. Sorry, it's been a hot day, so my head is a bit. But I do want to say, first of all, a huge thank you to Steph of Brutalist London for putting this together. A huge thank you to my amazing panel. Thank you all. A huge thank you to yourself. As you all know, your ticket donations and proceeds go to Centrepoint, which is a charity for homelessness. So this is a really important event. And as I said before, be supporting AK and GG at the end. Check out their art, speak to them, and make sure, you know, we're talking about all these amazing estates, but keep up to date what's happening in your local area. If I can ask for myself. Thank you all, everyone.